Our third, our third speaker is Professor Yogendra Yadav, whom many of you know from his writings and appearances in leading media outlets. He's an activist, psephologist, political scientist, and has been a senior fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, CSDS, in New Delhi. He's founding member of Swaraj India and national convener of Bharat Jodo Abhiyan. Yogendra has been closely following the caste census debate for more than 3 decades and has written a series of op-eds in Indian Express and Tribune on the subject, and I invite you all to check it out. Welcome, Yogendra. The 3 speakers will first share their thoughts in the order I introduced them in, and then after asking a couple of questions, I'll open the floor to questions. The online audience can keep sending their questions and comments in the Q&A box. So everyone in the room, please keep your phones as well as laptops on silent. The robot here is very, very attentive to any disturbance. We are recording this event, so if anyone in the room does not want to be recorded, please let us know. We will not be uploading the Q&A portions of the video in any case. For the audience on Zoom, as I said, please keep dropping your question Q&A in the Q&A box. The video of this session will be uploaded eventually on Cambridge Sociology YouTube channel, so please free to follow us there. And Caste as Practice will return next term with 2 more events. So without further delay, may I please invite Trina to share her slides and share her thoughts with us. Trina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, you're seeing my slides, not my notes.
Not your notes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Jusmeet, as well as Priyanka and Manali and the other organizers, as well as the Caste as Practice Network and the Department of Sociology. I'm so honored to speak on this panel with Christophe, Guilmoto, and Yogendra Yadav. I was invited to speak on the question of how do bureaucracy and institutions shape the exercise of counting caste. So I'll focus on the role of the bureaucracy today. As many of you may be aware, and as Jusmeet just referenced, the political leadership of India announced earlier this year that it would include a caste-wise enumeration in the upcoming decennial census, that is the delayed census of 2021, which will be conducted in 2027. If this announcement translates into a change in census policy such that Census 2027 gathers nationwide caste data, it would indeed be historic. Censuses in independent India have limited enumeration to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, 2 state administrative categories consisting of ex-untouchable and indigenous communities. So what's at stake with the Census 2027 enumeration of caste? Why does this matter? Well, caste-wise data from Census 2027 could play an important role in understanding exclusion and privilege related to caste hierarchy. More specifically, it could provide crucial data on inequality, the caste-wise distribution of a range of socioeconomic factors, including literacy, education, household assets, amenities, such as access to water and electricity, among other indicators. Census data could help implement reservation or affirmative action policies in India. As already mentioned, censuses in India have collected data on scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and similar data is required to implement affirmative action for additional eligible groups. And caste-wise data from the census could inform a broader set of policies and programs to destroy caste hierarchy and the structural mechanisms that continue to support it. While considerable media attention has focused on how Census 2027 will include the first nationwide enumeration of caste in independent India, as this article in The Hindu also states, this is not new. Census 2011, the last decennial census of India, was also supposed to collect caste-wise data. As such, in my presentation today, I'll focus on what happened in Census 2011 and in its aftermath to explore the role of the bureaucracy in counting caste, or in this case, the role of the bureaucracy in blocking a successful caste-wise enumeration. In May 2010, the political leadership, then led by the Indian National Congress Party, who was in power at the time, found itself backed into a corner and reversed its long-standing opposition to enumerating caste in the decennial census. Caste census advocates were thrilled by their victory after months and months of organizing. When Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee publicly announced that, quote, caste will be included in the present census, end quote, national newspapers and the TV media widely covered this historic change in census policy. Yet, despite this public concession by political leaders, the victory for caste census advocates never materialized. Census 2011 did not collect caste-wise data from the entire population of India. Between May 2010 and July 2011, in a series of maneuvers involving multiple plot twists, the executive bureaucracy, and in particular the Office of the Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India, which is housed within the powerful Home Ministry, pushed the caste-wise enumeration out of the decennial census and into two alternative state projects, before finally announcing that it would merge the caste count with the revised below poverty line survey, which it renamed the Socioeconomic Caste Census, which I'll call the SEC survey. The SEC survey started data collection in July 2011, a few months after data collection for Census 2011 was completed. Like with previous censuses in independent India, Census 2011 limited data collection to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Scheduled castes, or ex-untouchables, consist of historically outcast groups, specifically Dalit Hindus, Sikhs, and Buddhists. Dalits from other religious communities, such as Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians, are not included in this administrative category. Scheduled tribes, or Adivasis, consist of indigenous groups from any religious community. The justification for limiting census enumeration to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes has been the need to have data to determine the size of each group's reservation or affirmative action quota. However, based on this justification, Census 2001 and 2011, the last two decennial censuses, should have also collected caste-wise data on other backward classes, or OBCs. OBC is an administrative category that includes diverse groups from Shudras or peasant subcastes to Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians and other groups that vary by region. OBCs became eligible for central government affirmative action benefits in the 1990s, and so there has been administrative need for data on OBCs during the last two censuses. So this leads us to a central puzzle. Why, despite the May 2010 public concession and the administrative need for data on OBCs since the 1990s, did Census 2011 not collect caste-wise data? Relatedly, why did the government fail to publish the caste-wise data it collected as part of the 2011 Socioeconomic Caste Survey? In my larger book project, I argue that this recent case of a failed caste census is an example of how bureaucratic deflection operates. The administrative bureaucracy publicly complies with the demands of historically excluded groups, but privately maneuvers or resists the implementation of policies that challenge the unequal distribution of power and resources. More specifically, the upper levels of the bureaucracy and allied institutions subvert and sabotage efforts to make caste power visible. The concept of bureaucratic deflection builds upon a long scholarly tradition that theorizes the embeddedness of Brahmanism, that is the ideological structure of caste hierarchy within the state, despite ongoing efforts at resistance. I won't have time today to discuss the entire process of how bureaucratic deflection unfolds in this case, but I'll provide a quick overview to how the executive bureaucracy, and in particular the ORGI, or the Indian Census Bureau, made critical decisions that deflected responsibility and ensured the project's failure. And then I'll focus my time on one particular stage in the process during this talk. The first stage involved the macro politics, which I briefly previewed, by which the caste-wise enumeration was kept out of Census 2011 and eventually pushed into a revamped below poverty line survey, renamed the socioeconomic caste survey. At stage 2, which I'll focus on today, that consisted of planning for the data collection in the SEC survey. The third stage included the ground level survey operations, or the actual process of collecting data from households. In this stage, I draw upon my observations of household interviews and ground level operations in the South Indian city of Bengaluru in the state of Karnataka. And in stage 4, the collected caste-wise data were analyzed and buried. I'll focus now on a few key decisions made during the planning stage, including the design of the questionnaire and the training program for enumerators, as a parallel process should be happening right now in preparation for Census 2027. The SEC survey instrument consisted of 1 question on religion and 2 caste-related questions. The religion question was open-ended, unlike in past decennial censuses. The first question on caste included 4 answer options: schedule caste, schedule tribe, other, and no caste tribe. Notably, it excluded the state administrative categories of OBC and general. The general administrative category largely consists of caste-privileged groups. In doing so, it failed to classify more than 75% of the population, a major shortcoming for a supposed caste census. The other answer option became a catch-all category, including diverse groups from Dalit Muslims to caste elite Brahmins. In addition, the inclusion of the no caste tribe answer option created an opt-out for the enumeration of caste. The second caste-related question was expected to produce detailed caste tribe information for those categorized as scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other in the previous question. Yet it only included preset lists for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, as with past decennial census. For those classified as other, or coded 3 in the first caste-related question, the second caste question became an open-ended question. No effort was made to standardize the spelling of caste names or have local supervisors postcode the data into OBC or general administrative categories. Without caste lists for the catch-all other category, and since no effort to standardize the spelling of caste names was made, the survey would undoubtedly generate millions of open-ended responses. During the planning stage of the SEC survey, the decision was made to use tablet PCs to directly record responses during the household interview. To do so, planners decided to have a 2-person data collection team for the first time in a census: an enumerator who would serve as the lead interviewer and a data entry operator who would input information into the tablet. Current or retired employees would serve as enumerators, while school teachers who had recently served as enumerators in Census 2011 were ineligible to do so again. Data entry operators were hired by private companies who secured government contract to oversee data entry operations in a particular state or region of a state. Enumerators were expected to participate in a 2-day-long training covering a range of topics. Yet the training material neither instructed enumerators to standardize the spelling for caste names nor discussed how caste and religion intersect for religious minorities. While the training material explained how religion intersected with caste and tribe for the enumeration of SCs and STs, the instructions were vague in describing the broader relationship between religion and caste, particularly for Muslims and Christians. As Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians are not included in the scheduled caste administrative category, the lack of clarity on how to enumerate caste for religious minorities decreased the likelihood that the collected caste-wise data would be able to document caste oppression and privilege within the Muslim and Christian communities. Data entry operators Sorry, I've just screen popped up. Data entry operators were expected to act as electronic stenographers and simply record household responses. As such, they received a short technical training on the use of tablet PCs and the data entry program. They were not expected or trained to have a sociological understanding of the questions and answer options. The decisions regarding the design of the questionnaire and the training of enumerators and data entry operators made during the planning stage of the SEC survey affected subsequent processes of data collection and analysis and the publication of the data. I'll briefly discuss 3 such impacts, although several others also occurred. Based on my observations of about 300 household interviews in Bengaluru, I found that the no caste option was utilized as an opt-out by caste elites. Sometimes it was offered up by the enumerator when they sensed that the respondent might be hesitant to discuss caste, usually due to visible wealth and resources of the household, or in other cases, the respondents themselves expressed skepticism about the collection of caste data. In addition, I also encountered an enumerator who was enumerating 4 blocks in a working-class Muslim majority neighborhood, explained that he simply entered no caste for all Muslim households without asking the households themselves, as Muslims have no caste. More broadly, the glaring absence of a plan for how to enumerate caste for over 200 million Muslims and Christians left enumerators and DEOs to fill the gap with their own understandings. For example, one data collection team that I observed for 2 weeks in a neighborhood in the periphery of the city recorded Sunni as the caste for all Muslim families, even in instances when a respondent first offered up a caste identity, such as Ansari. Accompanying a different data collection team, I observed the enumeration of Muslim families in a majority Hindu and wealthy centrally located area of the city. In this instance, data collectors recorded Muslim or Islam as the religious identity and entered the conveyed caste identity, for example, Pathan or Sharif, for the caste question. In my observations of 20 to 25 Christian households across multiple neighborhoods, I saw data collectors record Christian for the question on religion and denomination, for example, Methodist or Roman Catholic, for the question on caste. These answers emerged during the back and forth between data collectors and respondents, and the worldviews of data collectors heavily shaped the processes of collecting caste-wise data from Muslims and Christians. The decision not to create or use caste lists for over 75% of the population who were not enumerated as SC or ST led to the collection of over 4.6 million responses for the caste-wise data. Sometimes for one caste name within a region, more than 50 to 40 different spellings were recorded. When the executive bureaucracy published the BPL data from the SEC survey for rural households in 2015 and for urban households in 2016, the caste-wise data remain unpublished, and they have since been deemed unpublishable. I want to briefly contextualize how the SEC survey questions and answer options embed an ideology of castelessness in the data. Sociologist Satish Deshpande theorizes how castelessness frames caste as a problem of the oppressed, and in doing so, obscures caste-based privilege and power. While caste as a source of disadvantage may be visible, caste-based privileges wear the, quote, garb of secular modernity, end quote, and in doing so, justify ideologies of meritocracy that obscure the role of inherited caste privilege in accessing social capital and material resources. In the SEC survey design, the inclusion of no caste tribe of that answer option strongly aligned with an ideology of castelessness. The decision to include no caste tribe appeased comparatively privileged groups who saw little benefit to having their caste identity enumerated, and embedded a mechanism to obscure how caste and class privilege intersect within the census, within the survey instrument. The decision to neither enumerate the administrative categories of OBC in general, nor use pre-existed caste lists for the other answer option, or standardize the spelling of caste names in the second caste question, led to millions of responses that would prove extremely difficult to postcode and classify. Commensuration, which sociologist Wendy Espeland and Mitchell Stevens define as, quote, the transformation of different qualities into a common metric, end quote, or the creation of a set of comparable categories, was left until after data collection. But this, of course, the data was eventually deemed impossible to commensurate. The caste-related questions in the SEC survey reinforced castelessness and supported an obfuscation of caste privilege. Looking ahead now, back to where we started and returning to Census 2027 and the question of how do bureaucracy and institutions shape the exercise of counting caste. I just described a few steps in the planning stage that contributed to this process by which the bureaucracy deflected the collection of caste-wise data from Census 2011 and later in the SEC survey. For Census 2027, therefore, we should be attuned to whether the Census Bureau has started to update and finalize lists for OBC, General, SC, and SD administrative categories with inputs from the relevant state and local actors. If this preparatory work hasn't started, then the likelihood of Census 2027 using caste lists that have undergone field testing and revision becomes less likely. Second, will planners once again embed castelessness in the survey design by including a no caste answer option? There will be considerable pressure to do so from elites as a means to opt out from the enumeration of caste privilege. Yet collecting data from elites is crucial to understand inequality and the relationality of caste and its gradated nature. In addition, the new economically weaker sections, or EWS administrative category, is eligible for reservation or affirmative action benefits. As it problematically restricts to low-income individuals within the general administrative category, data is now also needed on the general category for the implementation of the EWS affirmative action. Census planners must also attend to the challenges that arise when trying to collect caste-wise data from religions such as Islam and Christianity that have no theologic basis for caste, but practically employ a caste system in South Asia. It will take time to develop clear protocols for a caste-wise enumeration of religious minorities and to develop written guidelines for both data collectors and households who may opt to self-enumerate. Finally, if the published data is insufficiently specific or remains too broad, the design and implementation of anti-caste policies and research on inequality will be difficult. So looking ahead, a really important step in the process is to create an oversight committee made of anti-caste scholar activists. The demand for a caste-wise enumeration has emerged from scholar activists, and their voices and concerns should be central for overseeing the entire process, from the design of the questionnaire to the training of data collectors to the analysis stage, and then finally to the publication and circulation and usage of the data to help ensure that the entire process unfolds in an ethical manner. It is the lack of democratic control over data systems that reinforces and reproduces inequality, as scholars such as sociologist Ruha Benjamin have shown in their research. Thank you.
So thank you, Trina, for this very, very rich presentation. Christophe, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Thank you, Jusmeet, Priyanka, and Malali for inviting me. I think it's a brilliant idea to bring together people familiar with the notion of caste census, and we really need to go beyond polemics and to see it as a tool. I mean, the future caste census as a tool for policy action. But first, I would like to start with a personal story, which is like more than 30 years ago, I conducted with a couple of colleagues a caste census in a small town in Tamil Nadu, and it worked just fine. And at the same time, I was looking at the census records from the colonial period for Tamil Nadu, again, for the Madras presidency. And there was so many caste data. I mean, I got overexcited. But then, you know what? I read also other guys, of course, Bernard Cohn, but there were other guys who told us that it was, in fact, really indecent to look at caste data that it was a a British construct, that there was nothing really completely Indian about the idea of caste. And then, so of course, you're familiar with what Dirks said or wrote, or Apadure about the census. So I thought really, I shouldn't do that. So I did other stuff and completely forgot about caste. And then in 2011, all of a sudden, I heard again about census focusing on caste. I was very surprised because caste is a British construct to divide India. So how come it was coming back as a policy tool? And then there is a story that Trina has told us, which was highly frustrating for data people like me, that we never got anything to process. And we were waiting. And then there was even later on, there was something completely surprising. There was a ghost caste census in Karnataka in 2015. And by that time, I wasn't working on India, so I was not paying attention. But later on, I saw some publication with caste data from Karnataka, and I was really surprised. How come they have exhaustive data about the caste distribution? And that was the first regional caste census. And we never got the data. I mean, I got some leaked data. They are very interesting and very exciting, but I cannot share them with you. And then later on, there was a Bihar story. So at that time, I was in India, so I followed it very closely. And then there was a couple of funny episodes, with Patna High Court getting involved. And then at that time, Nitish Kumar was not with the BJP, and that made the census possible, I believe. And then in 2024, I think they published the data. So here I have a PowerPoint where I'll share with you some pictures. Just wait a second. Okay, yeah, here we are. Let me share it. Okay, I have to. Sorry. Yes, here it is. And then, yeah, right. So, you know what about that caste census? I mean, it was, of course, renamed after some debate as a caste survey, but it's not a survey, it's a census because it's 100% of the population. So it was very successful. And here I'm talking as a statistician because I look at the data and said, well, yes, it looks like a census, it quacks like a census, it is a census. And what was surprising is that people did participate willingly in that census, and there were very few controversies. I mean, there are a few stories because, come on, we are in Bihar, and but very minor about very small groups. There was some confusion, but and compared to the 2011 census, the definitions, the caste definition, were top down. They were imposed on people. Like you couldn't say that you were just French or Mercian or whatever. No, you had to fit into one group. And in fact, there were 215 groups. And then there was a very small, guys, for a very small possibility to say that you were among others. And I think less than maybe 1% or less than that, very few households return their identity as casteless. But we are in Bihar, huh? So that's Bihar is not India, India is not Bihar. It's more complicated than that. And then whatever I could see showed me that it really was a successful census. And come on, Bihar is one of the largest populations in the world, it's as big as Mexico, or, it's not it's not a joke to draw a census and to implement it, especially when you have no support from the ORG in Delhi or from those who are used to taking censuses. So they did it. And then very soon after, they proudly shared the result. I mean, look at these people. They're pretty happy to show us the census reports. In fact, they need to be happy because they were the only ones to get the census reports. Nobody else got it. I don't know exactly what happened in Patna. I wasn't around. I mean, I was in Delhi, but apparently a couple of press people managed to borrow the caste report, which was printed, and to take photographs of all 100 or 200 or 300 pages, and then share them, because otherwise we didn't get to see the report. It was never disseminated. And when we saw the report, when we saw these were, this kind of things, tables that had been photographed by I don't know whom and then shared on internet. When I saw that, you know what, I haven't done anything. I just said, okay, let me keep quiet and wait for a proper PDF to come my way. Never came. I asked a couple of people in Bihar, blah, blah, blah. No, apparently that report was no more available. It was not, it didn't exist. I mean, till today, you cannot find it except those poor copies. So then I had to do something, is to recruit people who could who could type Hindi, properly, and to just enter the hundreds of pages of tables. So with numbers, I mean, numbers are not the easy part. It's the most boring part to do. So somebody did, I mean, two people did it for us. And finally, we got the tables. So basically, as you may know, the tables are about the 215 communities. And then you have all the variables related to the census. That is, all questions asked during the census, except a few of them. Like, for example, land ownership. This information was not published. That's, again, complete surprise, knowing Bihar. And so we don't have anything on that. But anyway, we have other stuff. And people jumped on the distribution of communities, because that's the first concern of people in India, is how big is my community compared to the other community? Fine, I can relate to that feeling, but they were behind that, there were a lot of more interesting stuff. I think Yogendra Yadav already published a couple of very interesting results from the census when they are disaggregated by some of the largest communities. For example, here it's about income. You can see the difference. Here you have the Bhumihar, on the top, followed by Brahmins and Rajputs, and at the bottom you have, for example, Mushahar. And you can even relate that to education. And you see that, yes, the more educated you are, the higher your income, with, in fact, Kayasta, which is a very small community in Bihar, really at the top of everything. And you can do a lot of other analysis, which I did with Himanshu, and so it's our paper in EPW. We went behind that, and we beyond that, and we did a factor analysis to use all socioeconomic information we had to rank communities. And so, for example, among the general community, you can see those you would expect, of course, to be on top, but also here Muslim groups. And you can see the variation within the general community. Here are the most prosperous communities, and here are the poorest. Now, same among OBCs, extremely backward, which is a category specific to Bihar, and then Dalit Adivasi. I put the tribals, there are very few tribal communities in Bihar, so that's why I merged them with Dalits. And this is in the order that you would expect, except that within categories, for example, you look at the Dalits and you discover that Dobi are in fact on par with EBCs, with extremely backward communities. In fact, they are quite privileged. And as it happens in UP, Dobis are not classified as Dalits, but they are considered as OBCs. So you see, another thing is that Muslim communities, they are in green on my chart, are all below, They are always the poorest of their category. So it's something that we observe only by having a systematic analysis. Now, I will conclude here because I think there are many more things that we can discuss together. But first, I would say, yeah, looks like it's feasible. At least in Bihar, you can do caste census, especially when you have a prior set of categories, of caste or tribe categories. And it's not like in 2011 or in other surveys where people are just asked to report what they think their caste is. Because not only you have spelling issues, like Trina was mentioning, but you have a lot of ambiguities. For example, in Bihar, there is a caste group called the Malas or the Nishad, but they go by very different names, like maybe 5, 6 different names. And in UP or in Jharkhand, all people who are vaguely fishermen or boatmen, they go by specific local names. And that's what they want to report. They want to call them Kevat, for instance, because that's what they are. They don't know that they've been already reclassified as Mala. So it takes some bargaining between the enumerator and the people to finally agree that, yes, this is what we are. Now, if you go to other places, like, for example, next door, West Bengal, people are not sure they have a caste, I've met a couple of people, Bengalis who said, yeah, good question, Christophe. Let me think. Let me ask my dad, for example. Some people would call their parents back home and tell me, oh, he says that we belong to this community, and especially so among Muslims, Some of them are, again, Bengali Muslims, had no clue. And they said, well, we are called this way, but I'm not sure it's relevant. But since you are asking and, I want to be friendly, so here is my answer. So it's not obvious that you can have outside Bihar a top-down approach to caste classification. And another thing is that in Bihar, it went on smoothly because it was very fast. But in the rest of India, like we are seeing right now in Karnataka, caste organizations are freaking out, like Lingayat. No, there are issues with Lingayat, who is not, with the Virashaiva or Lingayat, and Fokalinga also had issues because, of course, the numbers were too small, so they called it the first survey in 2015 unscientific. But well, I don't know. I would like to see the result and prove me that it's unscientific. And so we can expect only more caste mobilization ahead of 2027. Now, the question of usefulness, the point was made by Trina, and I fully agree. I think we don't need to discuss that. But there are a couple of challenges that I want to stress ahead. So, what I call definitional manipulations by caste groups, but also by government agents, because it's not only bottom-up, through a political mobilization, for instance. It might be also straight from local governments or from the national government, because they will have to consolidate a caste listing for entire India. And that's not going to be easy. They failed to do so in 2011, but one reason is that they were short of time for doing that. Because you can start with official, for example, OBC list at regional level, at state level, but look at them. Well, I'm looking at them very often. It's hell. You have hundreds of categories, different spellings, and then you move, say, from Bihar to Jharkhand or from Bihar to UP, and they go by different names. Or they become, these guys between brackets, this and that. And so it's not going to be an easy walk, for the census to have this consolidated caste listing that will be implementable in a top-down way. Then the second thing is that that was also mentioned by Trina. There is a lot of caste census hesitancy. People, and again, we've seen it in 2000 right now in Karnataka, but we've heard it also in Telangana. And a lot of people didn't want to, participate, to be part of that census. And these people usually belong to upper caste, but we don't know. They just don't want to be counted in. And why not? Maybe they don't have a caste. Come on. That's also so. I think the census will need to recognize what I call non-standard caste identity. Not only people of mixed origin, but people who just don't want to play by that game. And I think there will be a lot of them in West Bengal, for instance, or in parts of South India. You might find a lot of people who may not want to declare a caste identity, sometimes because they don't have one. And then there is another thing. It's a very technical point, but you will understand immediately. In India, we can imagine that the listing will end up with at least 1,000 castes. There were 200 in Bihar. There were, from what I know, 300 different caste groups in Telangana, which is much smaller than Bihar. So you can imagine. So when I say 1,000, I think it's an underestimate. How do you produce tables with more than 1,000 or 2,000 groups? I look at ethnicities across censuses in India, elsewhere in the world. You never see that level of complexity. Never. And when you take China, Indonesia, Nigeria, it's just like 20 or sometimes 50 groups. Indonesia is pretty complex, but it's less than 100. And when it happens, for example, in India, this is only for mother tongues. They record whatever you say. French is okay. And then they have to consolidate it into something understandable. Of course, it's always to the benefit of, let's say, Hindi, for instance. But it takes them years, and that's why language data are always the last to be published by the census. But this is a bottom-up approach of language. You can say whatever, Croatian, for example, is fine. But that's what they want to avoid. They want to have the listing. And how are you going to finally share these things with more than 1,000 categories? Have you seen already a table, 2 by 2 tables with 1,000 categories, running into pages? It's almost impossible. So dissemination is going to be an issue. And the next question is, of course, making the data available. Because in Bihar, we haven't seen anything at district level, for example. We haven't seen anything about land ownership. So everything is buried, all of a sudden. They've been collected. They could be processed in no time. For example, yeah, at district level, it would be interesting to see stuff, but we won't. And in Telangana, which is Congress supported, and they said yes, they are going to take care of it. Have you seen the census report from Telangana? Answer is no. They're still sitting on it. So I know the data have been processed. They are there. They've been there for more than a year, but we cannot see them. So we see the risk of data unpublishable for different reasons, just because of the format or just because people don't know how to deal with what they will see, what the data will show. Okay, I'll stop at that point.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christophe. Yogendra, would you like to come and give us a view from below? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Desai, Jusmeet and Priyanka, for this rare opportunity. Rare because while I've been speaking about caste census off and on, most of the time, any discussion on caste census remains at a very rudimentary level, because you are mostly justifying the fact that caste exists, that it can and should be counted, that you're not really being casteist for demanding that caste be counted, that it's not as impossible as it is imagined to be, and so on and so forth. So frankly, after a point, I just get bored of having to repeat that over and over again. I must have written 20 articles on it, but if anyone were to read it carefully, you would also get bored because I say the same thing over and over again. So it's great to speak to a group where one doesn't have to repeat those things and to move forward and discuss something more nuanced and more careful. That's why I really value this opportunity. I'll start from where Trina and Christophe have left. So I'm not sure if this will be a view from below, but hopefully a view from ahead. Because now that the government has declared a caste census, the question is, what kind of a caste census are we going to get? Whether it's going to do what we thought caste census should do. And in that context, I would begin by making two preliminary remarks. One is to distinguish between caste with census with a capital C and census with a small c. Census with a capital C is the census of India, which is legally mandated, which has a official backing, which is done once in 10 years, which does the kind of things we know it does, which we all call the census, which was meant to be in 2021, but is going to happen in 2027. It's a decennial census. Census in a small c, and that's a distinction I think Christophe also drew when he said, I looked at Bihar and I said, my God, this is census. Because census with a small c simply means any enumeration which is not sample-based, which actually covers 100% population. And census with a small c need not be restricted to the census of India on a decennial basis. So if you do a listing of all the government employees of India, it's the census, technically. So I would come back to this distinction because I think in many ways we need to go beyond census with a capital C. And if we really want to achieve the objectives of caste census, we may need to look at census with a capital small c as well. But I'll come back to that later. Just wanted to draw this distinction right in the beginning. Also, I wanted to refer to two books that have come. One, of course, by Trina. It's an extraordinary book. It's the first definitive account of caste census in India. I must compliment Trina, not simply because she happens to be there on the panel today, but I mean to write about it. I was just waiting for this seminar to be done so that I write about it, because it's actually a first definitive story, of the whole history of caste census in India from 19th century onwards. And somehow this very broad belief that all of us have is something happened in 1931 and not thereafter. No, that's not the story. So Trina tells you the entire story of caste census. But above all, she tells you the story of how the supposed caste census of 2011 was sabotaged, a story of bureaucratic deflection, which is what she so ably summarized today. It's a very important intervention because it comes from the perspective that many of us have shared, which is that caste census is critical to map caste inequality, to map privileges. This is a point we often forget. Caste census is critical not only to understand disadvantages, but actually to understand advantages. And the whole point, I mean, this is a point Satish Deshpande has made over and over again, which is that the whole point of not carrying out caste census is because the biggest privilege in the world is to keep your privileges behind a curtain. And that's the whole point of not having caste census in India. So Trina's book shares that perspective that we need caste census to unmask privileges, to understand the structure of inequalities so that policies could be framed in that light. And policies and affirmative action can be fine-tuned and various other policies can be made. This is a perspective that I'm personally very sympathetic to, and I've written about it. I did think that I should mention the fact that recently the debate has seen a very interesting intervention of a very surprising nature. Anand Teltunde has come out with a book. It's not yet published. I don't think it's published yet. But he was kind enough to share the manuscript. And here I thought I must mention it. It's called Caste Census. The word con reminding you of conning. Because usually we believe that those who support caste census are the ones who are pro-affirmative action, pro-social justice. And those who oppose caste census are all those who are opposed to social justice. Anand Teltunde is pro-social justice. And he actually, this book is very serious interrogation and skepticism about the idea of caste census. I happen to disagree. That's what probably my praise for the book will say, why I disagree with the book. But I think he raises some very important point, which I just wanted to mention right in the beginning, because he says, in a sense, it's not so much a critique of the idea of caste census. I take it as notes of caution, which is, what exactly is the nature of data collection? What is the methodology that's going to be deployed? What would be the framework of analysis? And what is the underlying political agenda? And he says, unless we are alert to these issues, caste census could actually do the opposite of what we think it would do. And the idea that caste census somehow is going to be a panacea for caste inequality is something that he questions deeply. I just wanted to place these two perspectives. As I said, I'm personally, I happen to disagree with Anand on this issue. But those of us who know his writings know that he doesn't write anything without thinking hard about it. And he has the courage to go against the flow. So these are cautions that need to be taken into account. All right, having made these preliminary remarks, now I will focus on the caste census that's about to take place in 2027. Will begin in 2026. will be completed in 2027, will be known as Census of India 2027. I'll ask 4 questions. One is, do we now have the political will? Second, do we have a policy to circumvent the bureaucratic deflection that Trina spoke about? Number 3, do we have a plan beyond the decennial census, which is to say beyond census with a capital C and census with a small c? And finally, do we have a vision? I'll focus more on the second and the third question, but let me start with the first one. Why have we not had caste census so far? The simple answer is there was no political will. The simple answer is that political leadership, while it was recommended right in 1951, while it was discussed very seriously by the first commission, before the Mandal Commission, there was the first backward class commission, it was discussed. While Dr. Ambedkar pressed for it in the 1950s, it did not happen because somehow the dominant political leadership of those times thought that caste, not counting caste, was a way of making this country casteless. And there is a way in which retaining caste privileges and maintaining castelessness fuse beautifully with each other. So I call it the syndrome of the casteless upper caste. Because it's their privilege of being upper caste that allows them to remain casteless. That was the dominant ideology for the first 50, 60 years. And Trina's book brings out beautifully, it's actually a very detailed historical examination of how this was deferred, how it was deferred, even after Mandal came into being, because India must be one of the rare countries in the world. This is nothing less than a policy scandal that you have a law which says category X will have this much percentage of positions in the government. But at the same time, you refuse to count it. I don't know of any other country that does so, that you have a law, but you do not count them. This is the odd situation in India after Mandal, that we have OBC reservations, but we don't know how many OBCs there are in the country. So the story of how that was managed in 2001, that is to say non-counting was managed, and the story of 2011 where the parliament actually agreed that it should be done, even after consensus of all political parties, even after the parliamentary decision, the whole thing was sabotaged. It was sabotaged, as she brings out, that it's lack of political will, essentially. Lack of political will, which is connected to bureaucratic deflections, which allows bureaucratic deflections to overtake, and tells a story of how the entire thing was played out. So the question is, do we have that political will today? Well, more than before. As we know, it happens because basically the Congress party has done a substantial switch in its policy, in its thinking about caste, driven personally by Rahul Gandhi in this particular instance, with a conviction which is very, very unusual in India's political establishment. And that left the government with practically no option. Clearly the government, the BJP did not want to hand over this cause to the leader of opposition. So as a preemptive strategy, they announced it. So in that sense, there is political will greater than has been the case in the past. But do we have political understanding to go with it? I don't know. Do most political leaders even understand the kind of issue that Christophe and Trina have been speaking about? Because unless you know those things, it can again be sabotaged. And do we have that, not just will, but do we also have that persistence? Do we have that resolve to keep following the issue and not allow it to slip? I don't know. We have to wait and see. But I'll focus on the second one, because which is where this will be played out, which is, do we have a policy now to execute caste census? We know India is going to have caste census, all right? We know that in the decennial census to take place in 2027, caste will be counted. All right, thank you. What exactly will be counted? We don't know the answer yet. There are many possible meanings, slips and sabotages which are waiting in some LA for us. This is not to give ideas to the government. I'm sure they are smarter than I am. So they have thought of all these sabotages. I'll just give you a list of what can possibly happen. Number one, the government can say, yes, we are going to do caste census, which is to say, so far we have counted only SC and ST, as was explained. The specific jati and tribe of the scheduled caste and scheduled caste has always been asked in India. Therefore, the idea that caste has never been counted since 1931 is wrong. Caste has always been asked, but only for SC and ST. So the government can say, okay, this time we'll extend it to OBC. Thank you very much. That's the end of the caste survey, caste census. It's done. So you would know how many SC, ST, OBC, and general are there in country. In the case of OBC, we will ask their jati as well. In the case of general, what's the need? Sabotage number one. That's quite possible. So far, the government's announcement does not rule that out. It is possible. Number two. Number two is a very complex thing, which is what Trina's book has brought out, which is that, okay, we'll count all the castes of this country. So therefore, it's going to be a genuine caste census. However, we will do it in the way it was done in 2011 socio-economic survey. As you know, in 2011, while the caste census was announced, after that it was detached from the census of India. A separate exercise took place, which was called socio-economic survey, which was actually nothing but an extended version of a BPL survey, below poverty line survey, which used to happen in the past. The government attached caste to that. But it was, the question about caste was posed in a very peculiar way, which she had shown. The way the question about caste is asked for SC and ST in the census is the following. You are asked, are you SC, ST or not? So I would say, okay, I'm SC. Then the next question will be, okay, here is the list of SC. Which one of these do you belong to? Straight question, official answer, categorized, leaves no room for confusion. If I give some answer, they would say, yeah, but which one of these are you? There is a list, there is a set menu. You have to pick from that. And you cannot play around. So I can say, sitting in Bengal, I would say I'm Yadav. They would say, okay, but Yadav is not here on the list. Which Yadav does it mean? Okay, leather community. Okay, it's known by this name. Shall I take this number? So it's categorized. This is not what happened in 2011. While they did it for SC and ST, as Trina had shown, the four options given were SC, ST, others, no caste. This is the categorization that was offered. This could be replicated in the census of India. And in case it's done, that's the end of caste census. Because what it does is basically you are then inviting, you're doing two things. Number one, you are inviting not hundreds, you are inviting millions of responses. And then at the end of it, you can throw up your hand and say, oh my God, millions of responses, what can I do with it? because you designed it in such a way. The whole point about saying socioeconomic census, caste census got so many categories that were unanalyzable. You designed it so that it would be unanalyzable. That was the whole point. So that's a real possibility. So the only option would be, as Trina has suggested, that look, for SC there is a list, for ST there is a list. For OBC too, there is a list. There are two lists. There is a central list, there is a state list. So you do have a list. Why not do exactly what you used to do with ST and ST? What about others? Christophe spoke about it. I would nuance what he said slightly. I would say the problem of being able to categorize the upper caste is not as impossible as it is made out to be. Number one, because it was asked in 1931. Actually, it was asked even in 1941, except that it was not tabulated. It was not tabulated. So we do have a list of upper caste in India. We have a list of SC castes other than SC, ST, and OBC. We do have a list. Unless new castes have been born in the last 60, 70 years, we do have a list. Official list. Number two, we forget the Anthropological Survey of India. People of India, 90 volumes of it. We have a detailed list of every single caste and community in this country with a 3 or 4 page long entry, encyclopedic entry, which is about all the multiple names that caste or community can have. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. That might still leave 0.0001%, but which is the case for everything in the census, which is of course the case with languages. Don't we know that languages take 2 or 3 years to analyze? Don't we know that there are hundreds of entries for languages? It always exists. It's doable, provided there is a will, provided someone is keeping an eye. I don't know if someone is. So that's the second thing. Third is the question of castelessness. Are there casteless people in India? Of course there are. Honestly, if you ask my children, Bengali Brahmin mother and Haryanvi Yadav father, they may not have a good answer to that question. Fair enough. I believe there would be a few million people. I don't think it will be more than 1% of India. But all right, it's a perfectly legitimate answer. We don't need to worry too much about it because please remember, this category has always existed in India for religion. You could always say you have no religion. I could even say Marxism is my religion. It's possible. It's an absolutely legitimate answer. The Survey of Census of India records it. Later on, for purposes of categorization, they might put it under miscellaneous or others. So, all right, record it. What we don't need to do is to invite it. The manner in which it was done in 2011 was inviting people to say this. In religion, they don't invite it. They say, what's your religion? Hindu, Muslim, Jain, Parsi, or anyone else, anything else. Where you have, and the instructions clearly say, if someone says atheist, record it. If someone says whatever anything else, record it. I'm not joking. You can say Marxism. It will be written like that. You can say sociologism is my religion. If you insist, they will have to record it then. All this exists. What are we worried about? The only thing is that we should not design it in such a way as to turn that into a central category. That's again my worry. And finally, in this very thing, the question would be about training, fieldwork, and the manner in which data would be made available. That's a point Christophe has made. I don't think it's an impossible thing. Thanks to Excel, thanks to everything, I can easily see a table with 1,000 rows and 50 columns. These are not impossible things now. They used to be impossible. They are no longer impossible. But you actually don't need to do that. You need to collapse into smaller categories. And these things are available. The only question is, as the Bihar experience has pointed out, what level of disaggregation do you offer when you offer the data? One is the level of analysis. Will this be available to me at the district level, at the tehsil level, at the block level? And what kind of variables would I get? That's a critical distinction because unfortunately in Bihar, the whole focus was on headcount. Unfortunately, the entire exercise of caste census has been turned into an exercise of headcounts, which to my mind is the least interesting exercise. Honestly, if you ask me, this can be answered right now. You don't have to do a caste census. Just go to CSTS National Election Study, which has been asking caste for the last 20 years and has not encountered any of the problems that we imagine it would. You can get a simple understanding about, you may be off by a few percentage points, but you can get it. Head count is not the most important thing about census. The most important thing is socioeconomic profiling at a disaggregate level. Will we get it, is the question. The third larger question I'm running, just quickly, 4 minutes now. Do we look beyond census with a capital C? Because census, even if I have all the data of census, does it give me a map of privileges and underprivileges in India? Partly yes, but largely no. Because census will not tell me how many high court judges are from which caste or community. Census would not tell me IAS officers. Census does not tell me company directors. Much of the happening sites are too tiny to be captured by a census and cannot be captured by any official. There's this kind of a census-like category. So what we need is the census of India with capital C to be accompanied later by a series of things. There is the economic census of India. There is the agriculture census of India, which actually looks at land holding. There is the cattle census. I'm not advocating the caste of cattle, but I'm interested in the caste of the cattle owner. Remember, it's one of the privileged assets in rural India. And interestingly, in all these cases, caste question is already asked. But at the moment, the caste question is only SC, ST, others, or SC, ST, OBC, others. It can be made more granular. There is the list of director of registered companies, which incidentally also asks for SC/ST, even now. You just have to expand it. There is the Household Consumer Expenditure Survey and the Periodic Labor Force Survey by the NSSO. There are, and I would want some new enumerations to take place with that, which is a survey of all the public sector employees, the All India Survey of Higher Education. These are the principal happening sites. Privileges are lodged in tiny sites, which have to be captured. Enumeration of all the public representatives. And remember, India has more than 3 million elected public representatives. Survey of constitutional office holders. All these are possible, can be done. And finally, my last question, do we have a vision to supplement? And that's where Anand Nilkumre's point becomes important, because much of the enthusiasm about caste census is driven by nothing except a desire to raise the level of affirmative action quota. That's the end of it, honestly. And that's sad. It's tragic that we restrict the question of caste census only to that. The real question is understanding caste inequality, understanding inequality in its multiple forms, caste being one of the principal vectors, though not the only one. and caste interacting with others. That is interesting, and that's something only census can tell you. That if we get a fuller picture of that, moving towards a vision of elimination of caste. So do we want to see caste census as an instrument of caste mobility? Or do we see caste census as an instrument of annihilation of caste? That's a question we need to ask. Sorry, I took a little more time. Thank you.